Some people like to think, oh, now that I understand how narcissistic people think, behave, treat people, I I don't have to worry so much because I understand their way of thinking, I understand their game, I can have the right boundaries in place, and I don't have to worry about them getting to me, about their toxicity affecting me, because I can insulate myself from that. So if it doesn't matter how much you understand about them and their behaviors, if you spend too much time around them, if you give them too much airtime, if you have too much interaction, too much exchange, if you give them too much possibility just to focus on you, then of course they're going to affect you. And one thing is, when when somebody spends quite a bit of time in the narcissist vicinity, sometimes you find that in family type relationships, friendship type relationships, or in just about any type of relationship, they're going to find a way of rattling you. They're going to find a way of projecting upon you if you give them too much airtime. It doesn't matter how much you understand about narcissism. It doesn't matter how much you understand the importance of boundaries. It's like a cat and mouse game. The more the narcissist is with you, they're learning your defenses and they're just finding new ways. And even if you are not going to let them get to you, you're going to find yourself chronically exhausted by trying to re erect new barriers so they can't get to you. In other words, you can't be at ease, you can't be at peace. And one thing they try to do constantly with people, the people who are around them the most, one thing they try to constantly do is to make you feel like you are to blame for certain things, to make you feel like you've done something wrong, to make you feel like you're not quite up to scratch. The thing about narcissists are they're very shameful people. Narcissists have very deep shame. They have very severe shameful feelings that they try to conceal, hide, subdue, suppress. But it's always going to find a way to work its way out of their system because they cannot process those feelings. And because they cannot process those feelings, they have to release it in other people so other people take on those feelings. When narcissists are around people, they're constantly trying to think, what can I get from that person? And how can I make that person take on my pain? That's what they think. What can they get from you? And how can they project upon you to feel better, get relief? So, thinking that just because you understand the disorder, thinking that just because you understand the nature of toxic people, that you can let your kind of guard down a little bit, that you can expose yourself to them a bit more, that's just fantastical thinking. It really is ludicrous because these people, it's kind of like thinking, you're going to go into a gas chamber or into the most polluted city and the most smoggy day and think, just because I understand the dangers of the gas chamber or the smog, I can put myself in that environment. Maybe I'll just hold my breath because I know it's not healthy. You protect yourself by holding your breath. But you can only do that in short stints. Maybe you do extra planning and you buy an oxygen tank. Yeah, you can only go into a cyanide gas chamber or be in a very, very polluted environment for a relatively short period of time with an oxygen tank before it runs out, and then you realize you're exposed. Just because you understand the nature of the problem doesn't mean you can expose yourself to that problem very long and expect that you won't be affected. You should only let yourself interact with toxic people in short stints, and then you let them be. No strings attached. And if there's any string attached, It has to be a string that can be easily cut. It must be with very little harm done. That's the only way you can really interact with people like that in a way that's healthy for you and in a way that doesn't endanger you. And of course, if you're in a relationship with somebody like that, where you tend to spend a lot of time with them, you can't really escape that. They're constantly going to make you feel small. They're constantly going to make you feel like you've done something wrong. They're constantly going to make you feel like whenever something goes wrong, it's somehow your fault. You didn't preempt the problem. You didn't preempt the issue. You fell short somewhere. You failed to make the proper contingencies somewhere. Narcissists have ability to put a spin on anything to make it feel like your fault. And if they don't blame you directly, they blame you indirectly through passive aggression or even humor, but this kind of toxic teasing. The bottom line is they have multiple ways to shift the blame upon you and to shift their shame upon you to make them feel better about themselves. And that's exactly why it doesn't matter how well you've experienced these people. It doesn't matter how much you're acquainted with, familiar with the games they play. Because just because you know a gas chamber is toxic and can harm you, you might think you can go in there and hold your breath, but for how long? Or maybe you go in there with an oxygen tank, but for how many hours? Eventually, you can't keep yourself exposed for too long and not expect to be affected by them. And if you have been around somebody like that for a long time, then chances are you do feel you can't do anything right. You do feel like everything's your fault. You do feel like you're somehow incompetent across all areas of life. Whereas, in fact, it's the narcissist who is either to blame, or they blow things out of proportions, or they identify a problem that's completely unrelated to anything any of you have done, but they somehow put a spin on it to make you feel like it's your fault. The whole reason narcissists over the course of their life, the whole reason they've come up with this masterful way to put spin on things to make people feel bad is because that's how they project. That's how they release their inner feelings of shame that they cannot process, and so they make other people take on the feelings, effectively projecting, and they get relief. That's how they survive. That's their surviving mechanism. And you shouldn't spend too much time around people whose survival mechanism is to find the most clever, unpredictable ways even to take you down and to keep you down. Thanks for watching.